else away from this, two things I would like for you to take away is, within lean is respect for people and eliminating waste, those two things. You can take two things away from this, you're way ahead of everyone else. But it's an application of lean manufacturing, and their principles now to the built environment. It requires a culture of respect and a focus on continuous improvement. So making everything better today than it was yesterday. Part of that is the last planner system. It's a workflow method, and that's made possible by the lean construction principles that I just spoke about. But it really leverages group planning and accountability amongst the trades, and respect amongst those. We at Grainger developed the last curve. We have a last planner system that we put together for our company. And I'm not going to speak too long on this other than it basically takes into account milestone planning, phase goal planning, look ahead planning, weekly work planning, and learning and improving. And on the right hand side, you can see some quick bullet points. That's basically just setting your milestones, determining your flow and a specific handoff amongst trades, and then make work ready for a 3-week look ahead. You're making promises amongst those trades to one another. And then you're also measuring those promises with daily stand-ups, and your retrospective is basically how did we do when we managed and we full planned and all those things between milestones. I will not go through this whole slide in great detail, but we did provide this to you. So again, on the right hand side, you see milestone schedule, phase goal, make ready, weekly work planning, and daily stand-ups. And there's some bullet points and some details that you guys can look at. Again, a little bit nervous. I'm also trying to rush through this. So if you guys have specific questions or anything, feel free to stop me or raise your hand and ask a question. Chris,
all right. So Tom gave you kind of a brief overview of lean scheduling, last planner. He kind of showed you those milestones, the phasing, flow, and then into the full planning. So I'm going to hit on the milestone scheduling piece, which happens first, and then Tom's going to jump back in and go through the phasing and the flow with his slides now. So, milestone scheduling. It's, to me, that's the schedule that you sit down with your project team, you create at the beginning, and it's more of that 30,000 foot view that Tom started to talk about. So we use it to communicate with our owner. We might use it to communicate with our subcontractors. We might use it to communicate with our bidding community. It's a much more broad schedule. So you may have a lot of, 50 to 200 day activities on there. And the milestones within that schedule, you sit down with your project team and you pick out and say, okay, well, because the milestone technically is a 0-day activity in the project, right? It's something you're going to strive to hit, and maybe it's when your building closure is complete. You say, hey, that's December 1st or whatever. And then the milestone schedule are the activities that roll up to create those milestones. So that's kind of the premise of what we use a milestone schedule for. We don't necessarily sit down and make 2,000 activity schedules that we try to build from. The whole process is make a broad schedule, develop milestones, and then pull plan between them. And that's how we get much more accuracy in when we build with our schedule. So just an example here, you can see some of the darker tasks like foundations as an example. We could say the completion of foundations on 3/30/16, that's going to be our milestone. And then those activities underneath where they roll up to that milestone. So that's kind of an example of how we create milestone schedules. And again, I already kind of talked about what a milestone truly is, and again, it could be from groundbreaking all the way to project completion. We like to pick them about every 6 to 12 weeks. We try to find a milestone in our project that we can then use to pull plan between. That's a pretty good range. If you try to pull too much more than that, it's hard to really get into the detail. And if they're too much shorter than that, you find yourself doing full plans way too long. And again, just another example of how earthwork and utilities, that could be 340 days worth of work on 7/30/120. That's the milestone. And then those tasks underneath it that kind of roll up, you can see some of those are still 20 and 25 days. When you get into the full planning now, you're going to say, okay, that site balancing of 25 days, let's start to break that down now into 5-day activities. And then once you get closer, start to take that 5-day activity, break it down into 2 and 3-day activities. Gives you a lot more opportunity to get into the detail of the scheduling, and it helps you to realize when there's potentially a problem with your schedule. You got a 40-day activity and you don't realize until day 30 that you're behind, it's too hard to recover. So another benefit of the full planning and continuing to break the work down, as Tom mentioned earlier as well. So he's going to jump through kind of a quick re-explanation of phasing. why we do it, and then kind of how the flow goes with that, and then we'll kind of jump right into the premise of the actual planning session.
Thanks. I like the clicker that you use.
It's imaginary.
Any questions on anything we've covered?
Yeah, did I blow through that too fast?
In my mind, I would try to break it down into phases. This one is, like I said, this is ag view. We are gonna do the basement level, so the blue and the red on the right hand side for the full planning exercise we're gonna do with you folks. But the overall project actually had a higher or a slab on grade component, which is the green. So the whole thought process behind this, just to kind of paint the picture, I guess, is we would start with the blue phase, phase one being the red, then we go to phase two being the blue, phase three being green was going to work towards the blue area. So we would actually put arrows on here, and I'm not sure exactly where they're at. There we go. So this is how we first started it off. Well, then when you think about it, if you're starting in this blue area, the deep area, you work your way towards the top of the page. The green area could start a little bit earlier. And that actually came from a subcontractor idea of, hey, what if we got this deep foundation area that started a little bit earlier, got here, started working into the red, then we can start on green and work over. By then, blue would be done. Now we can connect them. Now steel would, time out correct. So, well, that makes sense. Okay, and again, so we're gonna talk about phase one, phase two on the deeper foundation area with you folks during full planning today. So, flow planning is taking that, it's a visual way to show a flow of work for specific trades, but you're basically taking that phase plan that I just spoke about, and you're taking that down to 15,000 foot with the subcontractors and saying, okay, we thought about what the phase looks like. We think this is the best way to attack this. What's the best way to attack your specific work? So they start thinking through what their specific component of work is. And so with the excavator, he wanted to start in section A, B, C, and you can see basically how we work around. And then we put a time frame for that. And also you'll see during full planning, it's not only time, but also trade power. We would put that associated with that as well. So that you know how many folks are going to be there and then how long it's going to take them for that specific duration of work. Then that gives you a little bit of an idea of handoffs, right? So now they're thinking through their specific work, and then we'll get into the communication between trades in our full plan. The electrical flow plan is a little bit different, right? It's not as linear. There's a lot of underground utilities, there's a lot of floor boxes, there's a lot of main electrical feeds, those type of things. So we broke that down into 1, 2, 3, 4. The reason we did that little hopscotch, you guys will figure out, but usually it's a tie-in between that underground utility and then another specific trade. So again, we actually had this 1, 2, 3, 4 before, but speaking with a trade contractor, they said, hey, if I could get it here and here, I could give you this slab earlier. So then the structural steel person, we're talking slab versus talking about a grade, right?
So we kind of started at the 30,000 foot. We're starting to work our way down now. We talked about how we build the milestone schedule, we talked about the phasing and the flow. All that will start to come out in the actual full planning sections. So full planning, basically you are pulling backwards from whatever milestone you pick. A lot of people, when they build a schedule, they start with today and they start working forward. And then when they get to the end, they go, oh crap, I'm 2 months too long. So this is a little bit of a reverse thinking for the way a lot of special superintendents build schedules. They like to start from, I'm digging a hole in the ground till I'm ready to commission the building. So you're pulling backwards from your milestone. That's why they call it pull planning. And essentially you just work together with all your trade foremen in the room and just task by task, you start to work backwards. So what we're gonna pull to today is ready for structural steel on this ADVIA project. And to us, that meant all the slab on grade is complete because as Tom mentioned, they want to put lifts on the slab to make all the steel connections out of lift. So we'll be pulling backward from that. So the last task we're gonna see today in week 8, we're gonna say whatever the last slab pour is, that's our last ticket. So we'll kind of start to get the concrete folks to say, yep, I got the last ticket. It's 4 days to prep and pour, whatever it is, it's this manpower. We'll start to put those tickets up there and then start to work backwards. Okay, well, who's got to do the last thing before we can pour the slab? Oh, I got to put my floor boxes in for electrical and my floor drains in for plumbing. So they'll start to then build that sequence backwards. That's essentially what it is. And we get the trade foreman in the room to give us that information because it's much more accurate than anything you're gonna get from a project manager, who maybe has put together a schedule that they use to bid the job. They hand it to the foreman, he goes out to the site and he's like, I can't do this, right? So this is getting the expertise of those folks in the room to really help drive the detail of that schedule. And every time I've done one of these, I will tell you that we always find efficiencies in the work because they are much smarter at how to build these things and how to hand off quicker to the next one. So that does build that collaborative mindset. Tom talked about that a little bit earlier, getting everybody in the room to respect each other, to respect their information they're providing. You really get them to commit to each other. And then if you're on a project and maybe you don't have your subcontractors there yet, a lot of times we'll have kind of a pre-planning meeting with the subs and say, hey, here's what we're gonna pull to, here's our milestone date, this is the area we're gonna pull. Start to think about your work in this area, so when you come to the meeting, you've got that in your mind ready to go, so we're not sitting there starting from scratch. And then what I've also found is if you're on a project and this is maybe your second, third, fourth full planning meeting, you've already got all those trades on site, maybe in our progress meeting or whatever, say, hey, next week, we're gonna pull area B. You 4 subs, I'm gonna need you there. Come prepared with your work tickets of, your tasks, and let's be prepared to roll. And make it a formal meeting, send out an invite to all the project teams and say, your foreman has got to be here, not the project manager, we want the foreman. Set up an actual invite, and then have a nice space like this to do the meeting. I know it's not always that convenient if you're on a job site, but set up the room intentionally. You'll find that when you have trades kind of sitting next to each other that are going to be doing the handoffs, it works a little better than, the steel guys over here and concrete guys over here, and just room setup is important, and you'll find that the meetings go much better. Yep, and then as a group, you'll begin that planning process. So you can see up here on the right, we got an example of what we're calling work tickets, basically. So basically just like a activity in your schedule, but it's a smaller version that's, rolling up to a larger activity. And as Tom stated, it's not just the number of days for whatever that activity is. You actually require them to list their manpower, because I work with a lot of trade foremen that, as long as they've been in the business, they struggle staffing projects with the appropriate manpower to get done in the time they say they're going to get done. I mean, if guys have been doing it 20, 30 years and you're sitting there telling them, look, you don't have enough guys, you're not going to get done. This helps you let them see, okay, I got 5 work tickets on this day. This one has 2, 4, 6, 8. I need 10 guys here. I've got 4. So this really helps the trade foreman in planning. You might think, oh, I don't care how many guys it takes. It's really for their benefit. It helps them really staff the job to meet the commitments they're making to do. As you can see, 2 people one day, and then the work activity, and then you just start to build those and work backwards. Do you have a comment on these or no? And so then you're basically ready to do your whole plan, and you start at that milestone working backwards. As I kind of stated earlier, we just kind of start talking to the trades, and basically what the superintendent, project manager, project engineer, whoever's in that meeting from the general, usually just facilitates. It's really about getting all the trade partners to do the work and to talk to each other. It's easy for superintendent to stand up here and tell you where your ticket should be, but that's not how it's supposed to go, because that completely defeats the purpose. So it's really getting you folks here who are going to be doing this to actually think about it and come up with a work in your mind.
When you're thinking about your pre-pull plan, and as Chris indicated, sit down with project engineer, project manager, superintendent. Think about who's going to conduct or facilitate the pull plan. It may not be the superintendent. It may be the project manager who is better suited to have a discussion or to pull information and to think about the layout of the board. And actually on the project this project on STEM, the project manager facilitated the pull plan, and the superintendent was better at reading the room. Maybe seeing someone wince a little bit or some microfacial expressions or whatever it was. He's very skilled at reading that room and going, hey, I noticed you had an issue with that. Was there something you saw that you didn't like? Or you'd have to be able to do a little bit of that, right? So figuring out who that person was that was a facilitator, maybe it is a superintendent, maybe they're skilled at doing all of those things simultaneously, or maybe it's a project manager facilitating and the superintendent just asking questions of specific trades to get the most information out of it.